In this video, we're going to look at the album Undertow by Tool. First, I will give a brief overview of the album, talk about the importance of the album, then give a short history of the band leading up to Undertow. In part 3, we'll talk more about Undertow, the musical style, as well as if it falls under the category of nu metal or alternative metal. We'll also look at some of the lyrics on the album. In part 4, I'll talk about the song Sober and the music video, and then to close, I'll talk about how some of the critics reviewed the album and when it came out, how it was an influence on other genres, and how Tool in general is influential in the music scene. Undertow is the debut studio album by Tool. They released an EP called Opiate prior to this, but this was the first full-length. It was released on April 6, 1993, and is celebrating its 30th anniversary. It was released by Zoo Entertainment, produced by the band and Sylvia Massey. In the band is Maynard James Keenan on vocal, and Adam Jones on guitars, Paul D'Amour on bass, and Danny Carey on drums. This is also the only album to feature the original bass player, Paul D'Amour. The album was very important in the history of rock and metal music. It came out in early 1993. This was a time when grunge was still the most popular form of music. I don't think people knew what to call it back then. It was mixed in with a lot of different alternative bands at the time. Back then there were grunge bands from Seattle, and then the other alternative metal bands like Rage Against the Machine, Rollins Band, Helmet, Stone Temple Pilots. They're sometimes considered grunge, but not really. They were part of that short-lived genre known as alternative metal. I'll elaborate on this a little further when we talk about are they a nu metal band, but first let's talk about the history of the band. Back in the 1980s, the future members of Tool were all living in Los Angeles. Paul D'Amour and Adam Jones were more interested in the film industry at that time. Maynard James Keenan was working at a pet store. Danny Carey and Maynard James Keenan got their first start playing with the band Green Jello, and they would later have a minor hit with Three Little Pigs in the music video using stop-motion claymation, something Tool would use later on. Maynard and Adam would eventually form a band, and they were introduced to Danny Carey through Tom Morello, who we know as a guitarist for Rage Against the Machine. Fast forward a few years, and they signed with Zoo Entertainment. They released their EP called Opiate. This was a collection of heavy songs, maybe similar to what they would play in Undertow, but much different than some of the most recent albums. Undertow had many songs that were recorded at the time Opiate was released, but they felt they wanted to use their heaviest songs for their debut EP. When they first started to play live, they were on the second stage at Lollapalooza alongside upcoming bands such as Stone Temple Pilots and Rage Against the Machine. I feel this album is very different from some of their subsequent albums. This album had more of a cohesive sound. It was a little more simplified and stripped down. Many of the guitar riffs were played in drop D tuning. They used a lot of those heavy guitar riffs that Helmet would use at the time with their album In the Meantime. I could also hear some grunge influence on some of the tracks, specifically early Soundgarden. I know Tool are now considered to be progressive metal, but when Undertow was released, it had more of that 90s sound that was a lot more similar to some of the bands that I've been mentioning, such as Helmet and Stone Temple Pilots. Now for the most controversial portion of the video, are they a nu metal band? So let's try to define nu metal before we get any further on this topic. So nu metal is considered to be a subgenre of alternative metal, and it mixes elements of hip-hop, alternative rock, funk, industrial, and grunge. How many boxes does Tool check off? Not many. I've never heard any hip-hop mixed with this band, nor industrial music. As I mentioned, there's a slight grunge influence with the Soundgarden comparison, but that's all, so they are not a nu metal band. Now let's look at how alternative metal was defined. So alternative metal bands are often characterized by heavily down-tuned, mid-paced guitar riffs, a mixture of accessible melodic vocals and harsh vocals, sometimes unconventional sounds within other heavy metal styles. So alternative metal began in the 1980s. Bands like Faith No More, Living Colour, Soundgarden, Jane's Addiction. Then the genre got much popular in the 90s with Helmet, Rollins Band, Rage Against the Machine. So as I mentioned, there was some comparison to early Soundgarden, but I found this band at the time in their career to be sounding something similar to like Helmet and Rollins Band. So For the purposes of this video, we'll call Tool an alternative metal band, or at least at the time of Undertow. So let's talk about some of the lyrics on the album. The darkest song on the album is Prison Sex, a song about child abuse. There's a music video that was pulled out of rotation but later earned a VMA for Best Special Effects. The song seems to be sung from the point of view of both the victim and the abuser. It explores thoughts that were going through their minds. Then there's a song Sober about a friend of the band who was only creative while under the influence. This is another dark song about alcohol addiction. I will be speaking about more of this in the next section of the video. Then there's also the song Bottom. This one has a spoken word part with Henry Rollins. That part of the song sounded something like you would hear on like a Rollins band song. So it's a song that addresses the sensitive topic about somebody who hits rock bottom. Let's talk about the music video for the song Sober. I remember when I saw this for the first time, I was probably still in college. It was a very interesting music video. I had never seen something like this before. In the video, we see a small humanoid being. He lives in this abandoned mansion. The room is empty. There's only a chair, a table, a bed without a mattress. The humanoid thing finds his box. We don't know what's in the box, but whatever it is, seems to make him trip out. It's where we see some sort of like wild acid trip that this thing or person is experiencing. Then we see some strange things like stuff flowing through a pipe, and his head and arms vibrating, things like that. So in the end of the video, the box is empty and it leaves the viewer wondering what they just watched. It was just a very strange video back then. I guess it's hard to interpret this video. The song's about addiction, so a lot of the imagery in the video is about somebody who does not have any control of their surroundings or can't just turn their life around, and their life is just one big nightmare, basically. So the video was very popular. It would be something the band would do in future videos. I know they made a few more stop-motion music videos. I actually looked up all their official music videos. It seems that all of them are just or use some sort of animation or stop-motion. I don't think the band has ever appeared in any of their official music videos, but correct me if I'm wrong. So let's talk about what did the critics think of Undertow. So in general, the album received between 4 and 5 stars from most of the major critics. So for example, AllMusic gave the album a positive review. So they said, with its technical brilliance, musical complexities, and aggressive overtones, Undertow not only paved the way for several bands to break through to the mainstream adolescent mall rage demographic, but also proved that metal could be simultaneously intelligent, emotional, and brutal. So that's one thing I could say about Tool. They're definitely very intellectual in their lyrics and the way they write their songs. I think their later albums would have a lot more complex songs. There was one song based on like the Fibonacci sequence. I think that was from the Lateralis, that album. Also, I found another review where it was in a magazine and they only gave it like 2 out of 5 stars. So let me read this one. So it says, Tool must have stood out from the poodle head types in LA, mixing a sinewy, super tight, heavy rock riffology with lyrics of righteous anger and self-belief, entitled rather po-faced things like intolerance. They've earned a nod of approval from the grunge cogsinetti and will be shortly doing the obligatory dues-paying club gig triumphs, no doubt. There's an undeniable, ground-shaking power to what the quartet do and to what has grown in intensity since Opiate, last year's mini debut. Still, bereft of the irony, danger, and maverick of punkiness of grunge's finest, Tool ultimately will only help Alice in Chains reassert the trad metal market, which really isn't what we deserve. 2 stars. So this is, I think the person who wrote this is probably like eating their words. They were completely wrong about Tool and what they would become. So again, a lot of times in reviews, when you read these old reviews, sometimes these critics don't like these albums. So anyway, let's continue. Undertow definitely has been an influence on other rock and metal genres. I think Undertow kind of like led to new metal. I think bands like Korn would be releasing their albums like later on in the next few years, and some of the other bands, Slipknot will come out. And I think a lot of this stemmed from these earlier bands like Helmet and Tool. And also Tool, they really have a solid discography. I don't think they have any bad albums. And they really made a big impact on music history. I think they've become more of a progressive metal band as they've moved on. But this album is very important. So that is all. Please give this video a like. Please comment. I said some controversial things about Tools, so let me have it in the comment section. Feel free to write a big, long, drawn-out comment explaining maybe why I'm wrong, or maybe if I did something right in this video. So that is all. Thanks for watching. Check out this playlist. These are other anniversary reviews that I've done in 2023. I have maybe about 30 of them or something like that. So again, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.